We are in the book of Luke, Luke chapter 8, and you can feel free to turn to the book of Luke in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, third book of the New Testament there. Well, I was doing some reflecting this past week, really in preparation for this message, but just had a little fun reminiscing time of thinking through some of those common stories that we find learning about as kids. Maybe you grew up in the church, maybe you didn't. I don't know if it really matters either way. But these common stories that are found in the Bible that you might have learned about, that maybe a family member told you about, maybe a Sunday school teacher shared these stories with you, and you remember them, and they're very memorable stories that we find in the Bible. I would imagine that coming out of Sunday school, if you did grow up in the church, one of the things you probably never said to your parents was, "We learned so much about the book of Revelation this morning," or about Paul's letters. But what you probably did say is that I learned so much about some of these fantastic stories of the Old Testament. Stories like David and Goliath, stories like Jonah and the great fish. Maybe it was Daniel in the lion's den, or the way that God parted the Red Sea and allowed the Israelites to walk on dry ground and then just collapsed the Red Sea on top of the Egyptian army, and hundreds of thousands of soldiers died, and they probably didn't talk about that, but that's part of the story. And just so many of those stories that come out in the Old Testament. Stories like Elijah praying down fire from heaven on top of the altar and then chasing after the prophets of Baal, and all of these stories they just make you want to say, my God is so big, like he just can do anything. And I just remember leaving Sunday school and thinking about these stories going, man, there's a big God who does massive, massive things. And I remember learning one of those songs. Maybe you learned it too. It says, my God is so big, so strong, and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. It says the mountains are his, the rivers are his, the stars are his handiwork too. My God is so big, so strong, and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. And then it ends with, for you. Hand signs and arm signals and the works that go along with it. But I just remember as a kid thinking, yeah, he is so big. There's so much there's nothing that he can't do. And then you get to be an adult. And you lose some of that aspiration, some of that imagination. It seems to just kind of go out the window to some degree. I think because we tend to rely on ourselves a lot, and we don't necessarily need or see the stories of the Bible and the God of the Bible like we used to, but it's true that there's nothing that our God cannot do. One of those stories in the Old Testament continues to surface for me, just at varying times and at varying places. It's out of Daniel chapter 3, and it's a story of three young guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The story, just to give you a little bit of a summary if you're unfamiliar with it, but King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon has come into Judah, which would have been the southern kingdom at the time, and just tore it apart, just took it over completely. And as was the case often that King Nebuchadnezzar would do, is that he would bring back some of the best people, the most influential people, or the young aspiring people. He'd bring them back and they'd work in his palace. And they'd spend the rest of their days working for the king. Well, three of those individuals were those three, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Daniel was a part of that crew as well. And at some point during their stay, Nebuchadnezzar builds this enormous statue. It's somewhere in the 90 feet high kind of a capacity. It's just massive. And the decree that Nebuchadnezzar says to all of the people of all the kingdom of Babylon is that whenever the music plays, you have to bow down and you got to worship this idol. Well, these three have determined not to do so. And they understand the penalty, because the penalty is death. And under this threat of death, Nebuchadnezzar brings these three in. And here's what it says. It says that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king after the king's threat, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he doesn't, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up. And I love their conclusive statement as they look at the most powerful man on the planet, King Nebuchadnezzar, and say, the God we serve is able to deliver us. And that's exactly what he's going to do. In other words, he is ready. He is willing. And he is able. It is one thing to be ready and willing, but if you're not able, it's not going to happen. It is one thing to be willing and able, but if you're not ready, you're probably going to miss a great opportunity. And it's one thing to be ready and able, but if you're not willing, it's not going to happen either. When it comes to God, the question is never, is he able? He's always able, because God can do anything. The question is never, is he ready? He's always ready. He's never taken off guard. It's never a surprise to him when things take place. But often we look at the question, is he willing? Is the God of heaven and earth, the sovereign God over all things, including my life and yours, is he willing? Is he willing to move in the way that I want him to move? Is he willing to move in the timing that I want him to act in? Is it in his sovereign will to move in such a way and at such a time that I get to see it? Is he willing to do it? Luke chapter 8, we come to the close of this great chapter this morning, looking at verses 40 to 56. And what Luke has done, really starting at verse 22, is he's given us this fourfold miracle sequence. 4 stories that are really used to increase our faith. Increase our faith in the fact that God is over all things. That he sees all things, that he knows all things, that he has the power to act in all things. Jesus has the power over nature. Jesus has the power over the demonic world. Jesus has the power over disease, and Jesus has the power over death. 4-fold miracle sequence. This morning, we actually get a 2-for-1 miracle at the end of Luke chapter 8. It's like a miracle Groupon. Like it just kind of comes together. And the idea behind this is that he's really trying to show us who Jesus is in this 4-fold miracle sequence. That he is over disease, that he is over death. These 2 women, desperate, though one is pretty young, the other one a little bit older. They both have a massive need in their life. But Jesus has a divine appointment for both of them. Heard a story a number of years ago about a woman who had come in for a relative's funeral. She came in by herself. She sat in the back and was just sitting there for a little while. In walked a man. He's late and he's frantic. And he happens to sit right next to her. After a couple of moments, he leans over to this woman and whispers to her. He says, why does the minister keep calling Aunt Mary Margaret? What is that all about? And she just leans back in a polite way and says, well, because her name is Margaret, not Mary. That's why he keeps doing that. Turns out he was at the wrong funeral. The funeral that he was supposed to be at was actually across the street at the Lutheran church, and he happened to be at the Baptist church that morning. In understanding and kind of acknowledging what he's doing and where he's supposed to be, they almost let out one of those very inappropriate laughters in a funeral that no one ever wants to let out. He leaves, the funeral ends, they actually meet up back into the parking lot because he had parked in the wrong parking lot as well. They got to talking. He asked her out on a date. About a year later, they get married and been happily married for years. 2 funerals where an intertwining, intertangling of relationships take place, and out comes this rather beautiful outcome. Same thing is true here in Luke chapter 8. We have 2 miraculous events taking place, 2 desperate people in need, but there's Jesus right in the middle of it all. And we have this beautiful outcome developing. 2 stories, intertangled. Beautiful outcome because Jesus is ready, He is willing, and He is able. Take a look with me, if you would, at Luke chapter 8, starting at verse 40. It says, "Now when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed Him, for they were all expecting Him. Then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with Him to come to his house, because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed Him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind Him, touched the edge of His cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped." Luke begins in verse 40 by saying, "Now when Jesus returned." Jesus returned from what? Jesus returned from where? If you weren't with us last week, and even if you were, it's been a full 7 days. I acknowledge that. It's been a little while. But let me just share a little bit about where Jesus has been. Because what Jesus does earlier within this chapter, as we looked at last week, is that He decides to take His disciples on a boat ride. They're going to go from the west side of the Sea of Galilee. They're going to travel across the width of the sea and end up actually on the east shore of the Sea of Galilee. Somewhere in between that time, a storm of enormous proportions bears down upon them. They all think they're going to die. In fact, they're sure that they're going to drown, and this is the last night that they'll ever see each other. But Jesus steps up, speaks, rebukes the wind and the waves, shows His power over nature, and they continue on their way, only to be met by a wild man, a man full of a multitude of demons, comes screaming, running at them, falls at the feet of Jesus, says, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High?" And in that moment, Jesus speaks to that man, tells the demons to head on out into this herd of pigs, about 2,000 in number. They go squealing down the mountain into the Sea of Galilee. And according to Google, they would have floated at that point in time, but they were dead. They were drowning. It was over for them. They move from that scene back over to the Sea of Galilee, back to the west side, where now we have a crowd of people waiting for them. Interesting scene, because at the east side of the shore of the Sea of Galilee, we find that the people there in which this demon-possessed man was, they just want Jesus to leave. Like, they've seen this incredible thing take place. They witnessed this man whose life has been transformed by the power of God, and they say, "You got to get out of here. We're not interested. You need to leave as soon as possible." But Jesus travels over, it's about 7 miles to the west side of the sea, and they're just waiting for Him. They're excited about it. They've been anticipating Him. One man pushes himself through the crowd. He's been anxiously awaiting Jesus' arrival. And he falls down at His feet, and he pleads for Jesus to come to his house. We're only given 2 descriptions. We're given a name, and we're given a title. His name is Jairus. He's a synagogue leader. Maybe it says in your version of the Bible that you're looking at, a synagogue ruler. Jairus held a position of prominence. This was an influential man in this city or town, that wherever Jesus was. He held a position of influence. He was most likely wealthy. He was most likely well-respected. He was a man who got things done, and everybody knew him. Though he wasn't a Jewish rabbi, he was in charge of the administration of the synagogue. Everything that took place at the synagogue, Jairus was aware of and had his hand in. He knew how the service was going to go. He was the one scheduling maybe guest teachers to come in from time to time. He would have been in charge of building maintenance. He would have been in charge of community affairs. He might as well have been the town mayor. This man had a bunch of influence here in the city that he's in. Jewish culture revolved around a place like the synagogue. It was the central place. Not a man who would typically fall at Jesus' feet or anybody's feet, no matter what position they held. He was a man of prominence. However, both you and I know that it doesn't matter what kind of status we hold. It doesn't matter what kind of influence we have. When one of our loved ones, in his case, an only daughter who's 12 years old, is looking death in the face, none of that really matters at that point in time. It doesn't matter how much influence or prominence you have. It doesn't matter how wealthy or not wealthy you are. At this moment, as Jesus is on his way, desperate person number 2 comes into the scene. Her position in the community couldn't be further away from Jairus's. She was an outcast. Nobody wanted to touch her. She wasn't able to touch anybody else. For as long as Jairus' daughter has been alive, this woman has been on the outskirts. This person has been rejected. This person has been suffering. And clearly her condition is not physically debilitating. She's made her way to Jesus. She's made her way behind him, as we'll find out, to touch his cloak. But it is socially devastating. In Mark's gospel, Mark actually gives us a few more details that Luke leaves out. And Mark says this: she had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. I wonder if you've ever been there. I wonder if you've ever been in a position where you've done everything that you absolutely can, that you've spent all the money that you got. And instead of things getting better, they end up getting worse. And it leaves you at a point of just sheer desperation. I wonder if you've ever been in that spot. It is a place of hopelessness. It is a place of agony. It is a place of grief. And here she is. According to Leviticus chapter 15, I'll give you that homework assignment to take a look at that this afternoon. Leviticus chapter 15, this woman perpetually lived in a state of uncleanness. Perpetually. For 12 years. Anyone considered unclean was excommunicated from the community. Excommunicated from the synagogue. Could not take part in religious worship. Could not touch anyone, could not be touched. It was a place of great agony. And if someone did touch this woman in particular, either purposefully or accidentally, they were unclean as well and had to go through the ceremonial process themselves. It was an awful place to be. This woman had lost her health. This woman had lost her wealth. She had lost her status in the community. And though Jairus' daughter was nearing death, it's as if this woman has been dead for the last 12 years of her life. Let's continue. Take a look at verse 45 with me. Jesus says, "Who touched me?" When they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowd, the people, they're all pressing against you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me." Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. Then he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." And while Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," he said. "Don't bother the teacher anymore." Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid. Just believe, and she will be healed." I want to just pause and take a moment to consider being in the shoes of this synagogue leader for a moment. Here, his daughter is looking death in the face. It's his only daughter. She's only 12 years old. Jesus finally arrives from the other side of the lake. Been waiting anxiously for his arrival. Finally gets his attention. Jesus agrees. I would imagine that Jairus is at the front of the procession of people saying, this way, let's hurry up, let's get going. And then all of a sudden, as they're on their way, as Jesus has agreed to go to his house, this woman comes up behind him and stops the whole thing, doggone it. You got to be kidding me. We were on our way. This was looking really good. My daughter, I don't know if she's going to make it much longer. And then here this woman comes in and the whole thing stops. We don't have time for this. It's a massive interruption in his life. You got to be kidding me, lady. Don't do this right now. Jesus, come on. Don't even turn around. Don't stop. Just keep talking while we're going, kind of a deal. I can only imagine the tension in his life and in what he's thinking. But Jesus stops and he says, "Who touched me?" Verse 45. Did Jesus really need to ask this question? Does he really not know? Does Jesus, the God of heaven and earth, really need to understand and have no idea who it is that just touched him? If you go back to Luke chapter 7, you'll find a guy by the name of Simon the Pharisee. And within that interaction, Jesus knows exactly what Simon is thinking. Simon doesn't even have to say it, but Jesus knows, I know what you're thinking, so I'm going to address it. How is it that he's not quite sure who it is that touched him? Or was it for the benefit of somebody else that he even asked this question? It's like Genesis chapter 3. Remember, Genesis 1 and 2, God creates, all is good. Genesis 3, all goes downhill real quick. And the man and the woman, Adam and Eve, they go hiding. And God, the God of heaven and earth, says, "Where are you?" Has he really lost the only two human beings on the face of the planet? I don't think so. I think that he says what he does for a reason. I think that he says what he does to bring something to attention. Verse 47, "Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet." Clearly, she wants to go unnoticed. She comes up behind him. And it's clear that Jesus asked the question in the first place so that she wouldn't go unnoticed. What does she do with that? For the past 12 years, she's been in a position of being unnoticed, unwelcomed, unwanted. And quickly she becomes the center of attention. Jesus gives her the floor. She gets to tell her story. She looks at the crowd of people, all eyes focused on her. She might have said, "You guys know me. You know what my life has been like for the past 12 years. You know how far that you've stayed away and how far I have too. You know that I've tried to do everything on my own. You know that I've gone to the best doctors. You know that I've spent all my money. And you know that I just keep getting worse. I don't get better at all. I just keep trying to do everything on my own, and it's not working. And so I heard about Jesus. I heard about him, and my hope went up after 12 years where I had zero hope. Finally, I heard the name of Jesus, and I heard about what he does. And I just reached out. to grab a hold and I can tell you that my life is different now, that my life has changed dramatically. Is that not every story of every follower of Jesus? Your circumstances might be quite different, I get that. But the truth of the matter is that it's all the same. I was doing it on my own. I tried as hard as I could. I really kept trying to do all the good things that I thought I was supposed to do, but the fact is that I needed something more. I needed someone outside of myself to deal with who I am inside myself. And she reaches out and she touches him. And she gets to share her story. He says, "Go in peace. Daughter, your faith has healed you." Interesting thing here that in the Greek language of the New Testament, the original language, that word for heal or healed is sozo. It's actually translated as well, saved. Your faith has saved you. And it's as if Jesus looks at this woman, calling her daughter, familial relationship happening. I just want you to know that I think that the healing taking place within you goes much deeper than just your bleeding issue. You're being restored. Restored physically, socially, spiritually. Jesus in Matthew chapter 11 says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me," Jesus says. "For I am gentle and I'm humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And I don't doubt that some of you may be here this morning thinking, I am tired and I am weary of life. Rest sounds really good right about now. Far beyond physical rest, I need rest for my soul. Jesus says, come to me. While all this is taking place, a second interruption takes place, and it's dramatic. Someone from the house of Jairus comes bursting into the scene. He says, "Your daughter is dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore." Not the most sensitive messenger, wouldn't you say? Wouldn't you think that how about you ease that one in, brother? How about you just come in a little bit more indirect as opposed to so direct? And while Jairus is processing this devastating news, it's almost as if that's taking place in one ear, and in his other ear, Jesus is saying to Jairus, "Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, just believe." Yeah, but he just said that I know, don't be afraid. Just believe. But it's all over. There's no coming. I know. Don't be afraid. Just believe. We're back to where we started, aren't we? David and Goliath. Jonah and the great fish. Daniel in the lion's den. God parting the Red Sea, Israelites crossing. Elijah calling down fire from heaven. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, just believe. Our God is so big, so strong and so mighty. There is nothing my God cannot do. He is ready, He is willing, and He is able. Let's take a look here at the final verses with me, if you would. Verse 51 says, "When he arrived at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone go in with him except for Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and mother. Meanwhile, all the people were wailing and mourning for her. 'Stop wailing,' Jesus said. 'She is not dead, but asleep.' They laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But he took her by the hand and said, 'My child, get up.' Her spirit returned, and at once she stood up. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were astonished, but he ordered them not to tell anyone what had happened." As this scene comes to a close, let me just share with you that there is a major contrast between funerals here in the United States in the 21st century and funerals in a Jewish culture and context back in the first century. We tend to have our funerals that are very somber, very, very quiet, very subdued. First century funerals were wild. They were loud. They were chaotic. In fact, once again, going to the other Gospels, Matthew and Mark, who share the same story, helps us out as well. In Matthew chapter 9, it says that when Jesus entered the synagogue leader's house, he saw the noisy crowd and people playing pipes. Mark chapter 5, when they all came to the house of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. The hiring of professional mourners was commonplace back in the first century. Such a communal time. In Israel, it was all about community, all about the family. And so these professional mourners were brought in, probably, for the most part, women. And then you had a number of different, flute players and things like that. So you had music, and you had people screaming and mourning and wailing. And it was just chaotic and a ton of commotion happening there. Clearly, this girl is dead. Clearly, they would have known that. All this is taking place when Jesus arrives. And we know that they're professional mourners, and you can take a look at it yourself, because within about 2 seconds, they go from mourning to laughing. So it tells you just how much they actually really care about this girl. But they turn quickly into laughter. Stop wailing, Jesus says. She's not dead, but she's asleep. And they laughed at him, knowing that she was not dead. And what's not going to happen here is a resuscitation. That is not the plan. If anything's going to happen here, it's going to be a resurrection. I do my best not to bring up movie topics or movies as a point of just interaction with all of us, because I know how movies go. Some people have seen it, some people haven't. But this is The Princess Bride. If you haven't seen The Princess Bride, you're not quite living just yet, and you got to go watch it tonight. But in The Princess Bride, there's this scene where the main character gets tortured by the king, I think it was, and it's this torturing device is supposed to suck his life out of him. And so they take him to Miracle Max, a.k.a. Billy Crystal. And the statement that takes place within that scene as they lay him on the table is fantastic. Billy Crystal basically says this: "It just so happens that your friend here is mostly dead. And there's a big difference between mostly dead and all dead. And mostly dead is slightly alive." And then he grabs those fireplace bellow things and sticks it in his mouth and starts to pump air into it. And it's quite a scene there in Princess Bride. Let me share with you that this girl is not mostly dead. She is all dead, as it says. And the language that Jesus uses for death is language that the New Testament will continue to use all throughout it. He starts something here by sharing that actually she's asleep. The Apostle Paul says to the believers in Thessalonica, he says to the church, "Brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be informed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope. For we believe that Jesus died and that he rose again. And so we believe that God will bring with Jesus those who have fallen asleep in him." Professor and historian Timothy George writes about one of the lowest times in the great reformer Martin Luther's life. It's said that in I think it's the 16th century, that his daughter, 14 years old, got sick, really sick from the plague. At some point within her sickness, he was so heartbroken over the pain that she was experiencing that he finally prayed to God, just end the pain. Just take her out of her misery. She ended up dying at the age of 14. And it said that as the carpenter nailed down the coffin, that he shouted out, Hammer away, because on that glorious day, she'll rise again. So hammer away. Great confidence, great certainty for the follower of Jesus to say, it's temporary. This whole death thing, Christ he's won the victory over it. Not to worry about it. It's just a temporary deal. On that day, Jesus will take our hand and he'll say, my child, get up. But in the meantime, Jesus continues to call people like you and I out of darkness and into his marvelous light. In the same way that he called this 12-year-old little girl, my child, get up. In the same way that he said to Lazarus, get out of that tomb. Get those grave clothes off of you. He's calling you. Who can do these kinds of things? Who can rescue and restore those of us who it seems have gone too far, too much? Can a God really save me? I can tell you that only Jesus can. And why can I tell you that? Because he is ready, because he's willing, and because he's able. There's nothing my God cannot do. Let's close in prayer. Jesus, thanks for your word that speaks life. Lord, your word that calls us. You say that your word will not go out void, and so, Lord, I pray that even here this morning, that as we hear the words of Luke chapter 8, as it comes to a close, as we have this picture of Jesus, Lord of heaven and earth, over nature and over the demonic world and over disease and even over death. Lord, I pray that it increases our faith, it increases our trust. Lord, I pray that if maybe there's someone here this morning that has not yet put their hope and trust in Jesus as their Lord and Savior, there's not a day better than today. And so, Lord, I pray that they would come into the welcome arms of a holy God through Jesus Christ our Lord. And it's in that powerful and wonderful and precious name that we pray. Amen.